Hello, I'm Jeff Crawford for Journo.com, and today we're going to talk about stem cells. There's been a recent new development involving stem cells. A Harvard professor managed to create beta cells to treat diabetes type 1 out of stem cells. Uh, and it's a very positive step forward in stem cell therapy, and it doesn't just involve embryonic stem cells, you can also do it with adult stem cells. Now, back to the origins of the stem cell debate. If you were around in 2004, you'll remember it being very big news in the media constantly because President George W. Bush, put a ban on funding for stem cell research and new stem cell lines, and it became this very big deal. And if you bothered to actually research it all, you figured out very quickly that no one in the media knew what the heck they were talking about. Now, it's centered on embryonic stem cells. Embryonic stem cells they come from embryos. Basically, you destroy an embryo to get these undeveloped stem cells. And you can take them, put them in a nutrient solution, and they'll just clone an infinite bunch of stem cells from the base source. Not the most well understood thing. And the debate centered on scientists basically thought they could put these stem cells in a chemical bath and produce any cell in the body and then replace blood cells, replace nerve cells, improve a bunch of things, which would have been wonderful if it worked. But the problem was it didn't work. It was a lot harder than they thought. And what they were doing was they were putting chemicals to treat them and turn these cells into different types of cells, and they would inject them, and it didn't take, and the cells decided they would just go be whatever they wanted to be. And the result was something, a type of tumor called a teratoma, which is especially nasty because it's just pretty much anything. They'll produce like eye tissue, they'll produce teeth, they'll produce hair in weird places. They're pretty much just a big ball of cells, and anything can be in them. Like they'll cut one open, there'll be like an eye in there, and right next to a tooth. Teratomas are really nasty, and they're not usually malignant, but when they're from the early days of stem cell research, you just have crap all over the animal injected. And there was not, what happened with the debate in 2004 is the abortion lobby got involved in it, and they were just all over the place. Like it's a woman's right to choose. No, life is sacred. We should not be doing this. And really kind of irrelevant because the embryonic lines were pre-existing. In fact, the reason it became a debate in the first place was because pharmaceutical companies can patent a stem cell line. They already have it on the books. They can patent it, and they can patent any treatment for it. So the people that were pro embryonic stem cell research were secretly on the side of big pharma and had no clue about it. And the people that were on the pro-life side, well, the embryonic stem cell lines they're talking about exist already, so they don't have to destroy any more fetuses. You don't know what you're talking about either. And the whole debate turned out to be this just pointless nightmare because no one would take the time to research it. Now they're starting to make some process. Adult stem cells, they've been making progress for years. The first I heard of adult stem cells was there was a lady in China who got a chopstick in her brain, which the article I read didn't tell me how that happened, but it was interesting. I think it was a car crash. Somehow, as a result of a car crash, she ended up with chopsticks in her brain. Well, she ended up getting brain damage. But when the dude that took the chopsticks out scraped the material from it, found stem cells in there, cloned them, and reproduced them, and re-injected them. These were adult stem cells. It was the lady's already. Put them in there, and the lady improved cognitively. I haven't heard follow-ups on that, so I don't know. But again, well, embryonic stem cell research would be like, we've done this, and then you wouldn't hear anything about it because the experiment had some terrible consequence or side effect, and then it just went away. And meanwhile, adult stem cells were quietly in the background, making progress, actually developing cures. There was one for pulmonary disease that they took lung stem cells and basically had you breathe the mist of your own stem cells processed back to you, and people showed definite improvements. So very adult stem cells are very interesting things. This new process, the diabetes researcher, he started with embryonic stem cells. I don't know if they were a pre-existing line or he had to make his own or what was going on there. But what he did was he followed development step by step, and the control group, or how it would develop normally, watched what genes would turn on and off and repeated it step by step by step instead of just trying to do it in one go. So maybe he might dodge that teratoma problem. The other thing is that he's also been able to do this with adult stem cells, where they basically take skin cells and they treat them to make them turn into stem cells. So it's going to be interesting because one of the things about adult stem cells is there's not really much of a profit model, and it's a fairly expensive procedure to take cells from someone and cultivate them in a nutrient bath and make enough to do any good. So it's fairly expensive, and it's your stuff. They can't patent it. They can't sell you back to you. They can just charge you for the procedure. So there's no... so the business model is kind of odd there, and it's not really something they can mass produce. Not yet, anyway. Embryonic stem cells, if they work the way they were talking about, they're mass producible, patentable, and they can charge you an arm and a leg for them. But still might be a boon to medicine if they get it down. Now, the moral quandaries, I don't really agree with either side of the pro-life, abortion issue. I'm not comfortable with abortion. Like, I'll let you, go with it if it's absolutely necessary, but I would much rather prefer you avoid putting yourself in that position if at all possible. That's really a video for another time. But, that's my stance. I'm not really like, you deserve to die if you get an abortion. It's more like, is there any way to avoid this? Can you avoid this in the future? That's tend to be how I feel about it, because there's a fairly large psychological impact with abortion, and I am really digressing. But that's just for it is, what I feel we don't do when we talk about abortion is we don't make young ladies who might be considering it consider the consequences. I would make sure in sex ed class that they understand exactly what it's a pretty bad procedure, exactly what the procedure entails, the possible consequences and side effects, how it might affect them, personally. I'd make sure they knew that before it ever came up. I'd make them aware of what the side effects were in the hopes that they would be more responsible with themselves, because after all, we're supposed to be living in an equal world, and, don't you want to, if you want to have a family, don't you want to build a job and career and life first, and do it with someone you want instead of just randomly doing it? This starts off on stem cells, and I am just way off now. Back to stem cells. That's the hard part of the stem cell argument, is you wander into this other issue. Now it shows a lot of great promise for the future. I'm not real comfortable with the embryonic part of it. They've already done it, so, at least they don't really have to keep, making embryos and grinding them up. But on the same hand, I'm not entirely comfortable with it. I'm not going to sit there and tell someone who's paralyzed, if they develop an embryonic stem cell treatment that can cure someone that's paralyzed, I don't have to tell them they're paralyzed because I am uncomfortable with what you've done. No, I'm uncomfortable with what you've done, but you already did it, so, might as well get some good. If you committed the crime, at least get, the good part out of it. So that's my take on stem cells, and by accident, my take on abortion. I might want to write an article or do a video about that tells you a little bit more, so I don't, accidentally end up looking like a complete jerk because I didn't explain the whole thing. That's why I digress so much. It's like, oh, well, you better explain this before you get angry emails. But for Journo.com, I'm Jeff Crawford, and that's where I stand on the stem cell debate.